Max, my loyal and friendly dog, had always been a constant source of joy and companionship. Lately, however, he developed a rather peculiar habit, bringing home bundles of cash. Initially, I dismissed it as a one-time event, thinking perhaps someone had dropped some money. But as the days went by, Max continued to bring home more of these bundles, and it became clear that this was not a coincidence. Rather than report it to the authorities immediately, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate on my own and figure out where Max was finding all this money. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. I was completely baffled at first. Could this be someone's lost stash? If so, who was losing such large sums and why? The rational part of me said to call the police, but another part of me, the part driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, chose to follow Max's trail instead. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I was determined to get to the bottom of this strange occurrence. Little did I know I was about to uncover something far more sinister than I could have imagined. Determined to find out where Max was getting the money, I began following him discreetly. Every morning I'd let him off his leash and trail him from a safe distance. I knew it was an unusual sight, someone sneaking around after their dog, but Max's behavior had changed, and I needed to know why. He would dash off with an unusual amount of energy, his nose glued to the ground as if he was on a mission. I had to be careful not to lose sight of him as he bounded through the suburban sprawl of our neighborhood, past familiar landmarks and into areas I had never really paid much attention to before. After several days of following Max, he led me to a part of our neighborhood that I rarely visited, a dense, overgrown patch of woods on the outskirts of town. The woods were dark, unkempt, and foreboding, a place most people avoided. Max, on the other hand, seemed to navigate the terrain with ease, as though he had been there countless times. I had to hurry to keep up as he darted between trees, his tail wagging furiously. This was clearly a place he was familiar with, but for me, it was entirely new territory. The deeper we ventured into the woods, the more uneasy I felt. There was something off about the place. An eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. As Max led me further along the path, I noticed peculiar markers tied to trees, bright ribbons of various colors. These weren't the kind of markers you'd expect to see in the woods, and they made me feel like we were being led somewhere deliberately. My unease grew with every step, but I kept following Max, my curiosity driving me forward. One afternoon, about a week into my investigation, I stumbled upon a makeshift campsite deep within the woods. It looked abandoned, but there were clear signs that someone had been there recently. A small fire pit, still warm to the touch, sat in the center of the clearing. Discarded food wrappers and an old, crumpled blanket lay scattered around the area. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry, and it was clear they hadn't planned on staying long. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this wasn't just some random campout. Something more was going on here. As I looked around the campsite, I found something that made my heart skip a beat, a torn, singed map covered with strange, cryptic symbols. The map was old and seemed to have been hastily torn from a larger piece. The drawings were erratic and hard to decipher, but they clearly meant something. I pocketed the map, figuring it might be a key piece of the puzzle. Max sniffed around, seemingly oblivious to the significance of what I had found. This was no ordinary discovery. We were onto something bigger, and I needed to find out what. The campsite had an eerie vibe. It had been a meeting point for secret, perhaps illegal, dealings. I couldn't help but feel like I had walked into someone else's business, and not the kind of business you wanted to be involved in. My mind began to race with possibilities, each one more alarming than the last. What kind of activities were taking place out here? The cryptic map, the hasty departure, the scattered debris, it all pointed to something clandestine and quite possibly dangerous. I knew I should probably back off, but by then I was too far in to turn back. Each day I followed Max, and each day he led me further into the woods. I began to notice more strange markers, ribbons, holes in the ground, and small piles of stones. Someone had been marking paths and digging for something, but what? The bright ribbons tied to trees seemed almost like a breadcrumb trail, guiding us deeper into the woods. The more I followed Max, the clearer it became that he was leading me somewhere specific. I just had to figure out where. One evening, while trailing Max through his usual route, I heard faint, muffled voices coming from the direction of the campsite. My heart began to race as I slowed my pace, straining to make out the words. Max stopped, his ears perking up, which confirmed that I wasn't just imagining things. I crept closer, hiding behind a large tree, trying to stay out of sight. The voices were low, conspiratorial, like people discussing a plan. I managed to catch snippets of their conversation, quick exchanges about moving things and covering tracks. My stomach turned as I realized this wasn't just a random meeting in the woods. Something was definitely going on here. As I listened, I became more convinced that whatever was happening was related to the cash Max had been bringing home. The conversation was urgent, and they were discussing locations, places I recognized from the map I had found earlier. Just as I reached for my phone to capture a photo, Max let out a loud bark, startling me and, worse, alerting the strangers to our presence. They turned, eyes scanning the dark woods, and in a matter of seconds they disappeared into the night, leaving me no time to confront them. After that encounter, I realized I needed more information if I was going to figure this out. I couldn't rely on just following Max, I had to dig deeper. I began paying more attention to local news reports, hoping to find clues about any recent suspicious activities. I even reached out to a friend named Sarah, who had a knack for noticing things others often missed. Together, we began mapping out the places Max had led me to, cross-referencing them with reports of increased police activity in nearby towns. It became clear that whatever was happening in these woods was tied to a larger, more organized operation. Days turned into weeks, and my nocturnal stakeouts continued. I followed Max every night, hoping to catch sight of the people from the campsite again. Each night, I spotted different individuals moving through the woods, all with the same deliberate, cautious movements. They would arrive, spend a few minutes rummaging around, and then leave, always carrying small bags with them. It was a pattern, and patterns meant organization. This wasn't random, it was a coordinated effort. I knew I had to keep watching. Then, one stormy night, Max didn't come home. I waited for hours, growing increasingly anxious. The rain pounded against the windows, and a sense of dread settled in my chest. Something was wrong. Max was never this late, and the thought of him being out there alone in the storm made my heart ache. I grabbed my raincoat and flashlight and headed out, determined to find him. The woods were even darker and more ominous in the rain, but I pushed forward, calling out his name, hoping for a response. After what felt like an eternity of searching, I heard a faint bark. Following the sound, I stumbled across an entrance to a hidden underground bunker that I had somehow overlooked on my previous trips. The heavy lid was partially concealed by foliage, but I managed to pry it open. Inside, I found Max wet, dirty, but safe. He had been trapped, and judging by the items scattered around, this bunker was a central hub for the entire operation. My flashlight illuminated the space, revealing bags filled with money, maps, documents, and even equipment for printing counterfeit cash. As I explored the bunker, I found that the cryptic map from the campsite matched up with markings on the walls. The symbols were codes for stash points, indicating where more cash was being hidden throughout the area. I realized then that Max's strange behavior had been leading me to the nerve center of a highly organized money laundering network. My heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. This was a full-scale operation run by professionals, and Max and I had just uncovered the evidence that could bring them down. The discovery was exhilarating, but also terrifying. It was no longer just about bundles of cash. I had stumbled onto a massive counterfeiting ring, and now I had proof. I gathered everything I could find, maps, documents, even samples of the fake cash. With trembling hands, I packed everything into a bag, and with Max by my side, I headed straight to the police station. It was time to bring in the authorities. At the station, I told the officers everything, showing them the evidence we had collected. They listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock as they realized the scale of the operation I was describing. They asked me questions, took notes, and even brought in a few of their own experts to examine the counterfeit money I had found. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Max's strange habit had exposed a criminal operation that had been eluding the authorities for months. Over the next few weeks, police raids were conducted across the town, leading to the arrest of several key figures in the counterfeiting ring. The news was filled with reports of the bust, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. It was surreal to think that it had all started because of my dog's peculiar behavior. Max was hailed as a local hero, and the police even gave him a little medal for his services. It was a proud moment, not just for Max, but for me too. As for me, I had learned a lot from the whole ordeal. I had stepped out of my comfort zone, faced dangers I never thought I'd encounter, and in the end helped bring down a criminal operation. The entire experience was a wild ride, but it made me realize that sometimes you have to follow the trail, no matter how strange it seems, to uncover the truth. And Max, well, he was just happy to have me back by his side, no longer sneaking off on my own. In the end, I was glad I had followed my instincts, and more importantly, glad I had followed Max. If not for his quirky habit, I would have never uncovered the truth hidden in the woods. I learned to trust not just my own instincts, but the instincts of those closest to me, even if they had 4 legs and a tail.